It was a cold and quiet night in a small countryside town. The wind moved slowly through the trees and everything was calm. Inside a small wooden house at the edge of the road, a man named Ethan sat alone, drinking tea and watching the stars. He loved the silence. It helped him forget his lonely life. But tonight felt strange. The air was heavy and the dogs in the distance barked for no reason. Ethan looked out his window. The sky had a faint green glow as if lightning had flashed far away, but there was no thunder. Then he heard it. A soft cry. Weak, broken, like a baby's cry mixed with pain. It came from outside his house. Ethan froze. At first he thought it might be an animal, but then he heard it again, clearer, closer, and full of sadness. Heart pounding, he grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. Cold air rushed in. The sound came from near the old oak tree by his porch. As he walked closer, the beam of light caught something. A figure on the ground. It was a woman. Or at least, she looked like one. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly like moonlight. Her clothes were torn, covered with dirt and strange symbols, and in her trembling arms she held a tiny baby wrapped in silver cloth. Ethan gasped. The woman lifted her head slowly, her large golden eyes meeting his. She tried to speak, but only a soft clicking sound came out. Her lips trembled. She looked terrified and hungry. Without thinking, Ethan knelt beside her. "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" The woman stared at him, shaking her head weakly. Her body was cold, too cold. The baby cried again, a strange echoing sound that didn't feel human. Ethan's heart broke. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing. They needed help. He picked up the woman carefully and carried her inside his house. The baby's tiny hands glowed as they touched his shirt, leaving a faint mark of light. It scared him, but at the same time it felt warm, almost comforting. He laid the woman on his couch and wrapped her in a blanket. She was breathing hard, her skin fading from blue to pale white. The baby was shivering. Ethan didn't know what to do. Should he call the police? The hospital? But something inside him whispered, "Don't." He looked again at the woman. Her eyes were open now, filled with fear and trust at the same time. She pointed weakly at her baby, then at Ethan's chest, and placed her hand over his heart. Ethan froze. A vision flashed in his mind. A planet burning, ships falling from the sky, and the woman running through fire, holding her baby tight. He saw soldiers with glowing red armor chasing her. He saw her crying, hiding in a small pod, and then darkness. Ethan pulled back, breathing fast. The woman's hand dropped and she whispered one word that sounded like safe. Then she fainted. The baby started crying again. Ethan gently picked it up. The small alien child opened its eyes, bright golden just like the mother's. It looked at him almost as if it understood he was not an enemy. The baby stopped crying and touched his face with a glowing hand. Ethan smiled weakly. "Hey there, little one. I don't know who you are, but you're safe now." He rocked the baby slowly until it slept. Then he covered both of them with blankets and sat nearby, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Outside, the wind grew stronger. Far away, thunder finally rolled, but it wasn't thunder. It was the deep, heavy sound of engines in the sky. Ethan stepped to the window and looked up. The green glow he had seen earlier was back, brighter now. Strange lights moved slowly through the clouds like search beams sweeping across the forest. Someone, or something, was looking for them. He quickly turned off the lights and shut the curtains. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't understand who the woman was or where she came from. But deep inside, he knew one thing. If those lights were searching for her, then she was in danger, and now so was he. To be continued. The night passed slowly. The wind howled outside as Ethan stayed awake, sitting near the couch where the alien mother and her baby slept. Every sound made him jump. The strange lights in the sky had disappeared, but the feeling of danger stayed. At dawn, sunlight touched the room through thin curtains. The woman's skin no longer glowed blue. Now it was pale like human skin, though faint silver lines ran across her neck and arms. The baby slept quietly, glowing just a little. Ethan watched them and whispered to himself, "What are you two?" He boiled water and made soup. When he tried to feed the woman, she couldn't swallow. Her body rejected human food. Her breathing was weak. So Ethan gave her water instead, 1 spoon at a time. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Their eyes met. She looked afraid at first, then calm. She touched her chest and said softly, "Lyra, Lyra." Ethan repeated, "That's your name?" She nodded slowly, then pointed at the baby and said, "Nara." Ethan smiled. "Lyra and Nara. Nice names." Lyra looked confused but smiled weakly. Her voice was soft, musical, but broken. She tried to say more words, but he couldn't understand. Instead, she reached out and touched his forehead. Suddenly, Ethan saw flashes, pictures forming inside his mind. A giant silver city floating in the sky, people with glowing eyes like hers, fire falling from space, explosions, fear, soldiers with red armor breaking into homes, Lyra running, holding her baby tight, crying for help. Then, a small escape pod leaving a burning planet. The vision ended. Ethan gasped and stepped back, breathing hard. His hands shook. "You ran away. From a war," he whispered. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. He finally understood. She wasn't just a visitor. She was a mother running from death, from her own kind. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence. Beep! Beep, beep. Ethan turned. His old radio scanner on the shelf came alive by itself. Static filled the air, then a robotic voice spoke. "Unidentified life signal detected. Radius 200 meters. Military patrol dispatched." Ethan froze. He turned off the radio immediately. His heart raced. They were being tracked. He looked at Lyra. She understood the fear in his eyes. She shook her head and whispered, "Hide." Without wasting time, Ethan grabbed a blanket and wrapped Nara carefully. He helped Lyra to stand. She was weak but determined. They moved quietly to the basement, a small room under the floor where Ethan kept tools and old furniture. He led them inside and turned on a small lamp. "Stay here. Don't make a sound," he said. Lyra nodded, holding her baby close. Moments later, there was a knock on the door, loud and sharp. Bang! 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 "Open up, U.S. security forces," a voice shouted. Ethan's heart pounded. He wiped sweat from his face and walked to the door, trying to stay calm. Two men in black uniforms stood outside, holding strange devices that beeped. Their faces were serious. "Sir," one said, "we're checking for an energy anomaly in this area. Did you see or hear anything strange last night?" Ethan forced a nervous laugh. "No, just thunder and wind." "Why, what's going on?" The man looked at his scanner. It beeped faster. "There's something nearby," he said. Ethan's stomach tightened. "I live alone," he said quickly. "You can check if you want." The officers stepped inside, scanning every corner. One moved close to the basement door. Ethan's pulse hammered in his chest. He stood in front of it, blocking the way. "What's down there?" the officer asked. "Old junk. Tools, boxes, rats maybe?" Ethan replied with a weak smile. The officer stared at him for a few seconds, then looked away. "All right," he said finally. "If you notice anything unusual, report immediately." "Yes, sir," Ethan said, trying not to breathe too loudly. The men left. Their truck engine roared outside, then faded into the distance. Ethan waited for a full minute before he opened the basement door. Lyra was sitting on the floor, holding Nara close. She looked terrified but relieved when she saw him. Ethan smiled softly. "They're gone." She looked into his eyes with gratitude, deep, wordless gratitude. She placed her hand on his chest again, and a warm light spread between them. Ethan felt calm, as if her touch was saying thank you. He knelt down beside her. "I don't know why they're after you," he whispered. "But you're safe here. I'll protect you both." Lyra's golden eyes filled with tears. She whispered one word again, "Safe." Ethan nodded. But deep inside, he knew the truth. They weren't safe. Not yet. Outside, far above the clouds, a black ship floated silently. Inside, strange red-eyed beings watched a glowing map. A small dot blinked on the screen. Earth. One of them hissed, "We found her." To be continued. 3 days passed since the night the soldiers came. Ethan had not slept properly. He checked the windows often and avoided going outside except for food. The strange woman, Lyra, and her baby Nara stayed hidden in the basement most of the time. The fear of being found never left his mind, yet something inside him had changed. When he looked at Lyra and her child, he didn't see aliens anymore. He saw a mother and her baby, lost, weak, and trying to survive in a world that wasn't theirs. Every morning, Ethan brought them food and warm water. Lyra couldn't eat human food, but she survived on something strange, a mix of sunlight and water. Her skin glowed faintly when light touched it. It was beautiful and sad at the same time. The baby, Nara, grew stronger each day. She laughed when Ethan made faces or held her hands. Her laughter wasn't like a human child's. It sounded like music, soft and bright, echoing through the basement. It filled the house with warmth that Ethan hadn't felt in years. One evening, as rain fell outside, Ethan sat beside Lyra. The sound of thunder shook the small house. Lyra looked frightened. She held Nara close, whispering something in her own language. Ethan noticed the small crystal hanging from her neck, glowing softly whenever the baby cried. "What is that?" he asked gently. Lyra looked at him, then touched the crystal. Suddenly, an image flashed in Ethan's mind, a giant tree made of light surrounded by stars. He saw Lyra standing beside it, smiling, holding her baby. Then he saw darkness and fire swallowing the tree whole. When the vision faded, Ethan gasped. Lyra's eyes were wet with tears. "That was your home, wasn't it?" he said softly. "Your world." Lyra nodded slowly. "Gone," she whispered in broken English. All gone. Ethan didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the pain of losing everything. "I'm sorry," he said. "But you're safe here." "I promise," Lyra smiled weakly. She reached out and touched his forehead again. This time he didn't pull away. Suddenly his mind filled with light again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was memory. He saw Lyra before the war, strong, beautiful, leading her people. He saw her teaching children, growing plants that floated in the air. He saw peace, and then he saw her running, carrying her baby while soldiers destroyed everything behind her. The images faded. Ethan sat in silence. For the first time, he truly understood her pain. Lyra looked into his eyes. "You unkind," she said slowly. "Human, heart-strong." Ethan smiled a little. "You'd be surprised. Humans aren't always kind." Lyra tilted her head. "But you are," she whispered. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had lived alone for years, believing kindness didn't matter anymore. But now this alien, this mother, was showing him that compassion could reach beyond worlds. That night, as the rain stopped, Ethan went upstairs to check the sky. The storm had cleared. Stars covered the darkness like shining dust. One star, brighter than the others, blinked slowly, almost like it was watching. He didn't know why, but that star made him feel uneasy. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. He walked to the basement and found Lyra standing near the small window, holding Nara. Sunlight touched them both, and for the first time, Lyra looked peaceful. The baby's eyes glowed faintly gold. "She's special," Ethan said. Lyra nodded. Light, pure. Is that why they're hunting you?" Lyra's face turned sad. "Yes, they fear her. She can change what?" Lyra hesitated. Then she looked up at him and said, "Everything." Before Ethan could ask more, a loud knock echoed from upstairs. His heart stopped. He rushed up, peeking through the curtain. A dark van was parked outside. 2 men in suits were walking toward his door. Not soldiers this time, but government agents. He hurried back down. "Lyra, you need to stay quiet. Someone's here again." Lyra held Nara tightly. The baby started to glow softly and, sensing fear, Ethan whispered, "Please stop glowing." But the light grew brighter, filling the basement walls. Suddenly, Ethan heard voices from outside. "Sir, we're detecting strange radiation in this area." Ethan panicked. He covered the baby with a blanket. Please stop." The light faded, silence. The agents knocked again. "Mr. Hayes, we just need to check something inside." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. He looked at Lyra, who whispered something in her language. The small crystal around her neck began to shimmer. She placed it in his hand. "Protect her," she whispered. "If I..." "Gone, you protect her." Ethan's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "You're not going anywhere." Lyra smiled sadly. "Promise," he swallowed hard and nodded. "I promise." Footsteps echoed outside. The door handle turned. Ethan stood in front of the basement door, ready to lie, ready to protect the only family he had left, even if they weren't from this world. To be continued. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds there was only silence. Ethan held his breath, staring at the basement door. Then came the sound of footsteps outside, fading away slowly. He waited for 5 full minutes before daring to move. When he finally peeked out the window, the black van was gone. The road was empty again. He sighed deeply and leaned against the wall. "That was close," he whispered. Down in the basement, Lyra sat quietly with Nara in her arms. The baby's golden eyes flickered softly in the dark. Lyra looked tired, weaker than before. When Ethan came down, she gave him a faint smile. "They gone?" she asked in her broken English. "For now," Ethan replied. "But they'll be back. They're looking for you." Lyra looked down at her baby. "They not only ones," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked up, fear in her eyes. "Hunters. From stars. They come." Before Ethan could ask more, the air in the basement vibrated. A low hum, deep and strange, like the ground itself was breathing. The light bulb flickered and burst. Nara started to cry softly. Ethan felt the floor tremble. "What's happening?" Lyra's voice trembled. "They find us." Ethan rushed upstairs and looked through the window. The night sky had changed again. Blue lightning cracked across the clouds. A circular shadow glowed faintly above the forest. A ship. He had seen UFO videos before, but nothing like this. The craft was huge, silent, and menacing. 3 small lights broke away from it and descended toward the ground, moving fast. "Oh no," Ethan whispered. He ran back downstairs. "We have to move, now!" Lyra struggled to stand, still holding her baby. Ethan grabbed his old backpack, stuffed it with water, food, and a flashlight. Then he helped her up the stairs. They went out the back door, moving through the tall grass behind the house. The night air was cold, and the sky above glowed strange colors. They had barely reached the edge of the woods when something landed in the field behind them. A flash of blue light, and then silence. Ethan turned around slowly. 3 tall figures stood there, glowing faintly red. Their armor shimmered like glass, and their faces were hidden behind masks. Each one carried a long spear that hummed with electricity. One of them raised his head and sniffed the air. "She's here," a metallic voice said. Ethan felt his heart jump. He turned to Lyra. "Go! Run!" Lyra shook her head. "They smell Nara's light. No hide." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then I'll distract them." Before she could stop him, he grabbed a rusty flare gun from his bag and fired it into the air. The flare exploded bright red, lighting the field. The hunters turned toward him immediately. "There!" one shouted. Ethan ducked behind a tree as a spear of red energy shot past, burning the grass. He felt the heat on his face. He grabbed a metal pipe lying near an old fence and waited. As one of the hunters approached, Ethan swung hard and the pipe hit the hunter's arm, breaking something inside. Sparks flew. The creature roared in pain. Ethan backed away, terrified but determined. He ran toward the barn nearby, shouting to draw them away. Lyra hid behind the trees, holding Nara tight. Her eyes glowed faint blue, and she whispered strange words. The air around her started to shift, a faint shield forming to hide them. Inside the barn, Ethan moved quietly, heart racing. The hunters entered, scanning the darkness with red beams from their masks. He hid behind an old tractor, gripping the pipe. One of the hunters walked closer, spear glowing. Ethan picked up a metal wrench and threw it at the far wall. The sound echoed. The hunter turned that way. Ethan took the chance. He swung the pipe again, hitting the back of the alien's helmet. The mask cracked, revealing a gray face with glowing red eyes and sharp teeth. The alien hissed, grabbing Ethan's arm. Pain shot through his body. He fell, gasping. The creature raised its spear to strike, but suddenly a flash of blue light filled the barn. Lyra stood at the door, her eyes glowing bright as lightning. She lifted her hand and the hunter was thrown back by invisible force, crashing into the wall. Ethan stared, amazed. Lyra's entire body glowed now, her veins pulsing with light. She looked like a goddess of energy and sorrow. "Go," she shouted. "Take Nara." Ethan stood and grabbed the baby, running outside. Behind him, Lyra faced the 2 remaining hunters. She raised her hand again and a wave of light pushed them away, but it cost her strength. She fell to her knees. Ethan turned back. "Lyra!" She looked at him and smiled weakly. "Protect her," she whispered again. Then, from the sky, the ship fired a bright beam toward the field. Ethan ran faster, holding Nara tight. The explosion shook the ground behind him. When he finally reached the woods, he turned back and saw smoke rising where his house once stood. The ship hovered above it for a moment, scanning, then vanished into the clouds. Ethan fell to his knees, breathing hard. The baby in his arms began to cry. "Shh. It's okay," he said softly. "I've got you." But deep inside, fear filled his heart. Lyra was gone. And now, every star above seemed to be watching them. To be continued. The night after the explosion was long and cruel. Smoke rose from where Ethan's house once stood. He sat deep inside the forest, holding baby Nara close to his chest, his clothes torn and covered in dust. The air smelled like burnt metal and ash. He hadn't seen Lyra since the fire. She was gone, maybe taken, maybe dead, but in his heart he still felt her warmth like a soft echo whispering, "Protect her. Protect my child." Nara slept peacefully, her small face glowing faint gold. She didn't cry, even though the world around her had turned cold. Ethan watched her tiny chest move up and down and whispered, "Don't worry, little one. I'll take care of you." I promised her. The forest was quiet, only the sound of crickets and wind in the leaves. Ethan had built a small shelter using branches and an old tarp he found near the river. He hadn't eaten much. His mind was too heavy with thoughts. By morning, sunlight filtered through the trees. He looked up and saw the sky clear again. No ships, no soldiers. But peace felt fake. He knew something bigger was coming. He walked to the river, filled a bottle, and tried to drink. Nara reached out her small hand, touching the water. Instantly, the water glowed faint blue, pure and clean. Ethan blinked in surprise. "Did you just—" He smiled a little. "Guess you got your mother's touch." As the day went on, Nara became more alert. She looked at him with bright golden eyes, curious about everything. Ethan couldn't explain it, but sometimes when he thought something, like "don't cry," she seemed to understand, calming down as if she could hear his thoughts. That evening, as the sun set, a strange humming noise echoed through the trees again. Ethan grabbed Nara and crouched low, heart racing. But this time it wasn't the hunters. A small drone floated overhead, its red light blinking. He threw a rock. The drone crashed into the dirt. Ethan ran to it quickly and smashed its camera. On the side, the letters GSEC were printed. Global Security and Extraterrestrial Control. Government. Ethan muttered. "They're still looking for you." He knew he couldn't stay in the forest forever. He needed to find food, shelter, and a place where Nara could be safe. But where could he go with an alien baby glowing like a lantern in the dark? That night he sat by a small fire and spoke softly to the stars. "Lyra, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm trying. I'll protect her. I swear I will." A warm breeze brushed his face, and for a moment he thought he heard her voice whisper back, "Believe." The next morning, Ethan decided to move toward an old cabin he knew, his late father's place deep in the mountains. Hardly anyone went there. It could be a new start. He wrapped Nara in a blanket and started walking. Days passed. The forest grew denser and food became harder to find. He hunted a rabbit once but couldn't bring himself to kill it. Lyra's voice echoed in his head again. "Life is sacred." Finally, after 3 days, he reached the cabin. It was dusty, broken in places, but it stood strong. Inside, he found some canned food, blankets, and a radio that still worked. That night, while Nara slept, he turned the radio on, carefully, with low volume. A woman's voice came through. "Breaking news. Unidentified alien activity confirmed near Ridgefield County. Citizens are urged to report any strange sightings." Ethan turned it off immediately. His chest tightened. "They're still hunting," he whispered. Suddenly, Nara began to glow again. This time brighter. Ethan looked down. She was floating an inch above the bed, eyes open, light radiating around her like tiny stars. "Nara," he gasped, reaching out. The light faded instantly as she dropped softly back into his arms. She smiled up at him, innocent and calm. But Ethan's hands were shaking. "You can't do that, little one," he whispered. "They'll find us." He stood near the window, staring into the dark forest. He could almost feel eyes watching from somewhere far away. Maybe the hunters, maybe humans. Both wanted the same thing, her. He took a deep breath. His mind was clear now. There was no turning back. He looked at Nara, who was playing with her fingers, small sparks of gold dancing around them. "You're not a weapon," he said softly. "You're hope. And if they want you, they'll have to go through me." Ethan started to prepare. He reinforced the doors, dug a small hiding place under the floor, and stored food. He trained himself every morning, running, lifting, planning, for the first time in his life. He had a purpose. As the night fell, he held Nara close, whispering a promise. I don't know how, but I'll make them see. Humanity isn't all bad. You'll see sunlight again, without fear. Outside, in the distance, a red light blinked once in the sky, then vanished. Ethan didn't see it, but it meant one thing: they had found him again, to be continued. Morning came quietly in the mountains. Mist covered the trees and cold wind whispered through the valley. Ethan stood outside the old cabin, holding his cup of coffee, staring at the horizon. His body was tired, but his eyes were sharp. He had been awake all night, waiting for something, or someone. Inside, baby Nara slept peacefully in a wooden box filled with soft blankets. Her golden glow had dimmed since last night. It always did when she was tired. But even in sleep she looked otherworldly, beautiful and fragile. Ethan stepped back inside, checking the traps he had set around the cabin. He had placed motion alarms, old rifles, and even handmade explosives from the few supplies he had left. He wasn't a soldier, but desperation makes anyone clever. He looked at Nara and whispered, "They're coming, aren't they?" As if answering him, the radio on the shelf crackled to life. A deep voice spoke through static. Unknown energy reading confirmed in Sector 9. Dispatching special unit. Proceed with caution. Ethan froze. "They found us," he whispered. He grabbed his backpack and packed what little he could: water, food, baby supplies. He picked up Nara and was about to leave when the air outside suddenly shifted. The birds stopped singing. A low humming sound filled the valley, the same sound he'd heard the night Lyra disappeared. Ethan ran to the window. 3 black ships hovered above the trees, their red lights flashing like eyes. The wind blew hard as they descended. At the same time, the ground rumbled. Trucks, soldiers, and armored vehicles climbing the dirt road from the other side. Ethan's heart dropped. "Both sides," he muttered. "Humans and aliens. At the same time." He looked down at Nara, who was awake now, staring at him with wide golden eyes. "Don't be scared," he whispered. "I won't let them take you." He placed her gently inside a hidden compartment under the floor, a small space lined with blankets and covered with wood. "Stay quiet, okay? No light." Nara touched his face with her tiny hand, and for a moment he felt warmth spread through him. A memory flashed, Lyra's voice in his mind. "Protect her and she will protect you." He smiled sadly. "I remember." Then he closed the floorboard and stood. The hum grew louder. Through the window he saw red armored hunters moving between the trees, tall, fast, scanning with glowing visors. And behind them, human soldiers in black uniforms approached with heavy weapons. Ethan took a deep breath. Time to make my stand. He waited until the first hunter came close, then pulled the trigger on his rifle. The bullet hit its armor, sparking. The creature roared, firing a beam that exploded against the wall. Ethan rolled behind a table, shouting, "Come on! You want her? Come get me!" The soldiers outside opened fire, mistaking the hunters for enemies. Red and orange lights flashed everywhere. The forest turned into chaos, gunfire, explosions, screams. Ethan crawled toward the door and threw one of his homemade bombs. It exploded near 2 hunters, knocking them down. Smoke filled the air. He used the moment to run outside and grab another weapon from a fallen soldier. But there were too many. A beam of red energy hit the ground near him, throwing him backward. Pain burned through his leg. He struggled to stand. One of the hunters raised its spear at him. But before it could strike, a burst of golden light exploded from the cabin. The baby's cry echoed across the valley. Nara floated above the cabin roof, wrapped in a glowing aura. Her eyes shone like tiny suns, and her voice wasn't a cry anymore, and it was a song, soft and powerful, spreading through the air. Everyone, soldiers and hunters, stopped fighting. The golden light spread wider, touching the trees, the weapons, the people. For a moment, the entire battlefield went silent. The soldiers lowered their guns. The hunters stepped back. In the glow, Ethan saw something. Shapes of 2 figures standing behind the baby. One of them was Lyra. Her voice spoke inside his mind, calm and gentle. "You kept your promise." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. "Lyra." The golden light grew brighter until everything around them looked like a sunrise. When it faded, the hunters were gone, vanished. The ships in the sky turned and flew away, disappearing into the clouds. The soldiers blinked, confused, as if they had just woken from a dream. One of them whispered, "What just happened?" Ethan limped to the cabin, where Nara floated down softly into his arms. Her glow faded again and she smiled at him before falling asleep. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were clear now. The world was quiet. "It's over," he whispered, holding her close. "You did it." But deep down he knew it wasn't really over. The world had changed. People had seen too much. He looked at the horizon and the rising sun painting the sky in golds and thought, "They'll come again. But next time we'll be ready." He walked back into the cabin, closing the door gently behind him. For the first time in a long while he felt peace. Outside in the wind, Lyra's voice whispered once more, "Thank you, Ethan. Humanity still has light." To be continued. Years passed. The world changed slowly but quietly. The day the sky glowed gold had never been forgotten. Some called it the Ridgefield event. Governments hid the truth, scientists argued endlessly, but no one could explain it. Ethan never spoke to anyone about that day. He left the mountains and built a small house near a lake, far from towns and cameras. That was where he raised Nara, the little alien girl who had become his whole world. Now she was 10 years old. Her golden eyes still shone softly at night, but she looked almost human. Her skin a pale silver under sunlight, her smile bright and curious. She learned fast, read books, and asked questions about everything. Ethan watched her from the porch one morning as she played by the lake, skipping stones across the water. Each stone glowed faintly when it touched the surface, sending tiny ripples of light. "Careful with the glowing part," Ethan called, smiling. "We don't need UFO hunters showing up again." Nara laughed. "Sorry, Papa. It just happens when I'm happy." He chuckled softly. "Guess that means you should stay happy all the time." She ran back and sat beside him. "Papa was my real mom like me?" she asked, her voice gentle. Ethan looked out at the water, silent for a moment. "Yes," he said softly. "She was kind, strong, and she loved you more than anything." Nara looked down, playing with the crystal pendant that hung around her neck, the same one Lyra had once worn. "Do you miss her?" "Every day," Ethan whispered. "But I see her when I look at you." The breeze carried the faint sound of birds and waves. For a moment, time stood still. As years passed, strange things began to happen around the world. Crops grew faster, air became cleaner, and new energy sources were discovered. All because of one mysterious event scientists traced back to the same golden wave that had spread from Ridgefield 10 years ago. Ethan suspected the truth. It was Nara. Her power had touched the earth that day, healing more than anyone understood, but he kept her hidden, teaching her to live quietly, kindly, and wisely. He wanted her to know compassion first, not fear. Still, news began to spread. People spoke of the Star Child, a legend about a being who would come to unite humans and visitors from the stars. One night, as Ethan sat by the fireplace reading, Nara came to him, her eyes serious. "Papa," she said softly, "they're coming again." He looked up, heart tight. "Who?" She pointed toward the sky. "The others. But they're not hunters this time." Ethan stood and stepped outside. Above the trees, faint blue lights moved in the clouds, quiet, peaceful. Not ships of war, but ships of hope. "You don't have to go," he said gently, fearing the answer. Nara smiled. "I think I do. They're lost like Mama was, but maybe now they can find peace too." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her no, to keep her safe forever. But he remembered Lyra's words. "Protect her and she will protect you." He nodded slowly. "If you go, promise me one thing. Don't let them change who you are." Nara hugged him tightly. "I won't. You taught me what being human means. And I'll never forget that." A soft light began to rise around her, warm and golden. Ethan stepped back, shielding his eyes. The pendant on her neck glowed brightly, pulsing with life. "Goodbye, Papa," she whispered. "Goodbye, Nara," he said, his voice breaking. "Go make her proud." She rose into the sky like a falling star in reverse, her light shining across the forest. The clouds parted, and the ships opened silently to welcome her. Then in one bright flash they were gone. Years later, people around the world would see new stars appearing in the night sky, stars that pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Scientists said they were new energy sources, but Ethan knew better. Every night he sat by the lake and looked up, smiling. "You did it, kid," he whispered. "You made them see we're not enemies." He spent the rest of his life in peace, proud and quiet. When his time finally came, he was sitting on that same porch, staring at the stars, and as his eyes closed for the last time, a faint golden light surrounded him, gentle, warm, loving. Lyra's voice whispered in the wind, "You kept your promise." Then for a brief second, two lights shone side by side in the sky, one gold, one blue, before fading into the stars forever. Humanity looked up that night and saw hope written in the heavens. The bond between worlds was no longer a dream. It had become a legacy. The end